again, if it's just you and I, it doesn't really matter. But it's so frustrating.
Well,
Um,
hello again.
all right, we're now live again. My audio is working. I have no idea what happened. Hopefully, a few of you see this, but we're going to continue with the demo because that was just
That's
getting good. And I was actually, you were doing a Docker Compose demo, and I was trying to throw questions at you, and I was like, he's just ignoring me. That's awfully rude.
That's right. That is the best way to do a demo. Is just yeah, I'm just gonna keep going and not stop. So, yep.
All right. So I did have a few questions. I
Oh, sure.
thought being able to manage the builders via BuildX on the CLI and the UI is obviously a nice touch, but it did make me wonder, how much, there's different types of organizations out there. For me, I want you to manage the builder. I don't have to care about it. I
Yep.
probably want to pick how much RAM or CPU. I don't even know if I get that much control. We didn't kind of go into that much detail. But what
Mm.
about for larger customers, enterprises? I mean, are they able to provision these managed things in their own cloud? Like, how does that work for depending on
Yeah.
a startup and enterprise?
Yeah. Great question. So, with this being the initial release, what we have today is a product that we manage everything for you. And so we manage the builders, and right as of today, um, depending on which tier, there's a and this is on the product page as well too. But there's really only two different machine configurations, and it's really based on whether you're personal or whether you're enterprise customer. Um, and you can have multiple builders. Of course, there's going to be additional cost. So if you're on an enterprise that's got 100 developers or 1,000 developers, obviously you're not going to want to share the same machine.
Yeah.
You can spin up additional builders. But as of today, yes, we do manage all the infrastructure. It is on the roadmap to provide the ability um, to provide additional offerings, whether to run those builders within your own infrastructure or um, even to um, continue to use our builders within our own infrastructure, but maybe connect to resources that require VPN access or inside of corporate networks and that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of different variants on the roadmap here. But yeah, this is just the initial release that provides the fully managed, we run it for you infrastructure.
Okay. And when you ran the Docker Compose up, I'm
Yeah.
curious, what's actually happening there. Is that tearing up my local directory, sending it to the builder is doing the build, and then we're pulling down the image? Like, is that the kind of workflow that's happening?
Yeah, so actually, how about this? I'll bring it back up and we can
I'm
take a look
scared
at
to
it.
change scene in case it mutes me again, but see what
Okay.
happens.
All
And
right, I can still
I'm
hear
still
you.
here. Yeah. Although I've
Yep.
now got random videos showing up. Let me. You want to share your screen?
Yep. And there it is. Okay. All right. Good to go.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure I'll work out how to get rid of our
Okay.
big faces behind us at some point, but right now it's not. I'm not going to fix
Okay.
it.
Sounds good. All right, then I'll just continue on. So when I do, and this is actually the case for any build. So even if I'm doing a local build, and I'll just run this and we can see what's kind of happening here. So what ends up happening is first off, it has to connect to, in this case, it's connecting to the build cloud service because that's the builder that I'm using. It's the driver. But even if I were using the local driver, it's going to have to connect to the local build kit engine that's running. Okay. And then from there, it's basically going to load the Docker file. And then based on uh, the, the Docker file, and the Docker ignore file, it's going to transfer context for what do I actually need to do this build. So in this particular case, since I'm just doing a build and there's not actually any copies that are occurring for the dev stage, I'm just setting the work directory and whatnot. That's why there's only 2 bytes. And honestly, I'm not sure why there's even 2 bytes there, but whatever. While if I do the full build, what we'll see here is that the context that it's going to be sending is a little bit larger, but even then, there's not that much because it's all cached. So it's computing all the checksums and everything to find out, do I have cache hits or misses or whatnot before it actually has to transfer the actual files. So in this case, if I were to tweak this and let's just, I don't know, turn it to question marks. Okay. Now, what that's going to do is invalidate that layer. And so what we'll see is that there's going to be more cache, that more context that's sent, because that particular layer, let it finish building here. The copy source, to, since that layer needs to be rebuilt, it's only going to send basically the files for this particular layer. So it tries to be really smart about what is actually needed to be transferred, because obviously if you end up transferring everything, then that's going to slow down things, especially for larger projects and whatnot. So it does try to be really smart of, hey, we're not going to send files for cache hits. We're only going to send things for the layers that need to be rebuilt. And then even then, only the source directory in combination with what's in the Docker ignore file. So even though like I've got the node modules and everything else here locally on my machine, well, the node modules aren't in the source directory, but it's again being smart about what am I actually shipping to the builder. And it does the same thing even with the local builder, but you just don't notice it as much because it's all just local file moving at that point. And then once
So when
it's
you added
done,
those
it does
question
build.
marks, did it just send that one file, or did it send the whole source directory?
Good question. So it does send the whole source directory
Right. Okay.
in this case. Yep. So it's going to, and that's actually, I want to say that our build team is looking at how it can make that smarter as well too. But as of today, yeah, it's sending the basically just the contents of the source side here. In this case, the whole source directory. Yep.
Okay.
Um, and then from there, yeah, it builds the images remotely, and then it basically downloads it just as if it were a registry. So we'll see that all these layers were already on my local machine. It's only the last layer that changed, and so I'm only pulling down this almost 81.5 kilobytes worth of content here. Yep.
Nice. Yeah, there's already improvements, performance improvements from that workflow.
Yeah.
Just with the way that that works and speeding things up, especially when a lot of the network intensive stuff and even the compilation stuff for different types of languages, that all happens in the cloud, which is really what we want to be seeing here. So I like that.
Yeah, and I've seen with projects that have lots of dependencies or having to download lots of files. I mean, the advantage again with a build cloud environment is that it's using the network pipeline and then the network pipes that exist on the remote build service rather than what I have at home. And I know we've all seen Yarn dependencies or Rust dependencies or really any dependencies can just take a long time to download everything. But having fat network pipes in the cloud make that go much faster.
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, with the dance class, Monday nights are when I'm there, and I had to work from there this Monday, and I did an npm install, and it literally took about 36 minutes, and that's kind of when
Wow.
I'm like, these things I don't need to run over my tethered connection to my phone in some concrete building with very poor connection. So
Yeah. Well, and a good point there. I mean, so there's a good chance that even with the Docker file, again, just depending on what you're building, you may still be downloading all the contents there, but with you doing an npm install and it's having to download every package, like every single one of those libraries is yet another network connection and TLS negotiation and everything that has to occur there. While if this happens in your build, then your final image has all that kind of packaged together. And so you're just downloading at the end of the day a single tarball that has all that rather than having to make those thousands of network connections and everything else. So even if you were downloading the same net content, it's going to be faster just because you're having to even just do that many fewer network connections.
yeah, definitely. So I haven't played with Docker Build Cloud yet. So if I ask you a
Sure,
question that doesn't make any sense, feel free to shoot me down.
sure, go
But
for it.
I do see that we can view the build details and there's a Docker desktop link. I'm assuming, do we get to understand cache invalidations on what's happening from Docker desktop and from the web UI?
Yeah. So actually, if I click on this here, which seen that, okay, maybe the VS Code integration isn't opening up, but I can just jump over to it. So if we jump over to Docker Desktop, what that's going to do is take me to the builds tab here and basically just open up the build that just ran. Okay. And this gives me a lot of details. And I'll admit it almost feels like there's too much details. And so we're still doing a lot of massaging of what's the right way to present some of this so it's not too overwhelming. Um, but it does give you a lot of good insights in, okay, where even this build that took 6.4 seconds, where was the build? Where was the time spent? Was it spent on the actual build or pulling the layers? And so there's the context transfer we were talking about earlier, um, and whatnot. So it gives me a lot of good details here. Cache usage as well too. How much cache is being used. So there's quite a bit here on the initial screen. It does tell me, hey, here's the dependencies. And what's cool about this is you'll note if I jump back to the Docker file that we actually used here. Let me make this a little bit smaller here. I'm doing a multi-stage build where I'm doing from Node, but my final engine is Nginx. Yet in my build output here, it understands that this was a multi-stage image, and hey, you actually had multiple images part of this. So I can kind of see what were all the different images, the base images that were used in order for me to do my build here. And if I had additional provenance or SBOM attachments, et cetera, I can see all that down here as well too. There's even some OpenTelemetry traces as well too. So there's a lot that comes in here. Any questions on the screen? Otherwise, I'll jump to some of the other ones.
No, this is great visibility so far. I'm
Yeah.
liking it.
Okay. And so, yeah, source basically just here's the Docker file that was built. Logs, I think we've all had builds in which, the build ran and something failed, and oops, the error message got collapsed or swallowed up somewhere else or whatnot. And going into the log output here, we could see all the output that occurred as part of the build. So all the console output, and you get it in its full entirety. And you can also see again, here are the layers that were cached. This particular one took 4 seconds. Here was all the output here. Looks like we got some ANSI character stuff showing up here too. But again, I could see the full log output. And then finally, the history. This gives me a little bit of details of kind of this particular project over time. So, this was build number 6, and this was a build that occurred, you know, 10 minutes ago, and then another build that occurred about 15 minutes before that. And so it's kind of just grouping it based on the project name here, but I can see, how's cache usage over time. So the first time I built this, it took 40 seconds, but now all my subsequent builds are, 4 to 6 second range. And then I can troubleshoot and debug into some of those builds as well. So pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, this feels like one of those things that the more you use these builders, the longer they live, the more they do the cache optimizations, that these charts are really going to start to show you things that like that performance is going to be undeniable after
Yeah.
4 weeks, 5 weeks, especially as software is iterative, right? It's not like we're doing major rewrites. I hope
Yeah.
every week we're changing, adding a little bit of debugging, adding a trace, adding whatever, a new environment variable, and seeing that progression of the cache being used over long periods of time.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's going to be super useful instead
Yeah.
of like what I do right now. Like I am a sucker. I don't know I'm a sucker, but I always just delete every Docker image I've got every week, every other week or whatever. I clean things up, I tidy up, I get rid of caches and pushing all that to the cloud where I don't even need to worry about it anymore. And I'm still getting that shared cache over long periods of time. And
Yep.
again, especially with a team that are able to reuse these caches. Like, why should 10 developers all do the same compute every single morning when it's just not that necessary? I mean, I'm already sold. I see the value of this kind of setup, which is pretty nice.
Yeah. And so to even build on, since you were talking about the team collaboration usage. All right, so let's go back to my Docker file here, and let's break it here. Okay, let's say I spelled public with 2 C's accidentally. Okay, and now when I build this, okay, obviously this is going to break my build. Okay, and when I do this build, okay, I get my error message here, and what I can do is if we jump back to Docker desktop, first off, I'm still in the build output from the previous one, and it's already telling me, hey, there was a failed build that occurred. That's now, I guess, kind of future in the history of from the build that I was initially looking at. Um, but I can see the failed output here. And while I know all these were for myself, but if what's cool here is that the build history is the build history for that builder, not just for myself. And so if any of my colleagues built this and created it, during this build they ran into failure, they could say, hey, I'm stuck with this. Hey, Michael, can you help me out here? And I can look into the log output and say, hey, here's where it's messed up. and I can help walk them through. So it's a collaborative debugging experience as well, in which again any team member, because it's a shared runner, all these outputs, all this log, all this stuff here is tied to the builder, and again I can help troubleshoot and debug, which is really cool. Actually, I'll show if I go to active builds. I don't have an active build. I'll just jump back over to the um, I won't switch the screens here, but I'm going to add more question marks to our, our React component. And now if I kick off a build, which I just press enter here, we can see that it shows me that there's the active build running right now. So I can see kind of live, here are all the builds that are running on this in this particular environment. And then I can see, yep, I fixed the build, and there it is. So
Nice.
again, it's trying to help me have visibility across my entire team with the shared runner, what's working, what's failed, and help troubleshoot. Because one of the things that we see quite often is that they're on teams, there are the experts, and then there's honestly, to be completely honest, there's those that don't care a squat for containers. They're just like, just spin up the containerized environment, get it out of my way, and let me just focus on my code. And so if something doesn't work right, this gives them the opportunity to just say, hey, Docker expert on my team, can you help me troubleshoot why my build's not working here? And now there's a mechanism for them to be able to do that together. So
Nice. All right, we've got a question in the comments. The question is, how does this differ from export Docker host equals and pointing it to some sort of SSH or remote Docker engine?
yeah, good question. So I mean, in that case, you kind of have a shared runner, okay, in which you're if, assuming you share that SSH builder with everybody on the team, um, you've got a shared cache, so you're getting some of that advantage there. But the disadvantage is, well, now you have to manage that machine. You're having to keep track of, okay, what versions of the operating system is it running? Is it using the latest version of the Docker builder, and just all the tooling? Like that's infrastructure you have to control, you have to manage, and everything. Which for some teams that's totally fine, and you can certainly do that. The other thing is then too, and I know we haven't done any multi-architecture demos yet, but if I wanted to build natively for AMD 64 and ARM 64, now you could technically still do that with SSH builders, but it's a little bit more complicated. And you're having to, again, how do I scale this across my team? Here's a bunch of configuration that you're going to have to set up across all your team and whatnot. So this just is a little bit more of a turnkey solution. It's fully managed, fully ready to go, and you can just get up and going. And again, you don't have to worry about the infrastructure.
Can we dive into that a little bit? Because I think that's a really compelling use case. So far what we've done is you've set your Docker default builder to be a remote builder, which I'm assuming is a single architecture machine, right? It's not running two CPUs and two kernels. So if I want to
Right.
do a multi-architecture build and I've got my default builder set to an AMD 64 somewhere, what is it actually?
Yep.
What's happening for the ARM? How does it delegate that?
Yeah. So let's actually let's give it a shot here. So I'll just jump back to VS Code. We'll use the terminal here. All right. So let's go back to the default builder here. Okay. And if I do a build x build, and let's specify multiple platforms here, Linux AMD 64, Linux ARM 64, I'll just tag this sample React app. Okay. Now, when I do this right now, it's actually going to fail at first. Okay. And this is actually something we're doing internally to, um, the, without getting too much under the hood, the the image store that Docker Desktop uses predates Containerd and predates multi-architecture and everything else. And so it doesn't actually have support to be able to store multiple architectures of the same image as of today. But there's been a lot of work, and you've probably seen this show up in the settings to be able to use, for example, if we jump over there, to use Containerd for pulling and storing of images. Like this is work to be able to do that. But as you can imagine, there's a lot of plumbing in Docker Desktop that has to get replaced in order to use this tooling here. And so once that's in place, then yes, this will work as you expect. Okay. So
But with
as of
emulation, right?
what, I'm sorry, what was that?
But it builds it with emulation when it's using the Containerd store.
So yeah, what I have to do is at first I have to create basically a new builder. Okay. And what this is going to do is it basically creates a container engine that BuildKit's going to run in. And let's just say, let's use that nostalgic Einstein. which is such a fun name. Which actually, maybe let's take a quick little tangent, shall we? Um, just a fun trivia fact here. Um, for folks that don't know, all those names come from, here's the Go code, the name generator. And there's it takes a random adjective from the left, and then a random scientist or notable scientists or hackers. And there's a specific call out, please, for any amazing man you add to the list, consider adding an equally amazing woman to it, and vice versa. And there's lots of information about it. So if you're kind of like, wait, who is this random name that just showed up here? Here's where you can find out. But the fun trivia fact, okay, if we go down to the code at the bottom here, where it actually generates the names, get random name, it gets the random left, gets the random right. And if the final name is Boring Wozniak, Steve Wozniak is not boring. Go back and get a new name. So there's your random trivia fact for the day.
The only valid use of GoTo I think I've ever seen. So.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So
I once got an angry Torvalds, and that was the highlight for me. So.
Because it's totally true.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
So anyways, now you know if you're ever in a Docker trivia and it's like, who is never allowed to be boring, you know it's Steve Wozniak. So all right, so going back here, so what I've done is I've basically built a new BuildX engine that's going to use basically a container to do this build now. And then it's going to use, inside of that, it has containerd, and it's going to be using that image store. Now, what's happening here is it's basically bootstrapping this builder, and then you'll see all the different steps. I'll try to get it so it doesn't scroll around too much. But each of the steps will have, okay, is this the ARM64 or AMD 64? Now, since I'm on an Apple Silicon machine, downloading right now, so who knows what my network connection looks like right now.
Yeah, you need to start.
Give this a second to download everything here. All right.
It'll get there.
Yep, it's getting there. Okay, so now we just discovered a new reason for Docker Build Cloud. Delegate all of your builds to the cloud so you can do live streams without worrying about your bandwidth.
It's an important concern. I'm with you.
It is. All right. So it's almost finishing downloading here.
Oh, that says we're doomed now. That's
it. And Russ just put in the comments, that was a perfect pause because I am on Apple Silicon machine. Audio cuts out. Yeah. Good call. Good call. All right. So what's happening here is you see that it's doing this yarn install, and it's doing it both for AMD 64 and ARM 64.
Yep.
And since I'm on Apple Silicon, the ARM 64 will run natively. And so you'll see that step took about 26 seconds. Okay. And whoops, looks like I got a error of some sort. Okay, looks like a networking. Okay, a DNS lookup. Yep. Which sporadically happens, and so I would just rerun this build, but you'll see even just with this, okay, the ARM64 it finished in 26 seconds to download everything, while the AMD 64 variant was still at 46 seconds and failed. Okay, so and it would have taken, I think, at least in previous testing, it takes about 2 to 3 minutes for it to do that yarn install while emulating. And it's just because it has to emulate the AMD 64 environment. I don't have a AMD 64 chip on my machine here. And so, yeah, it kind of stinks. And I would say it's even more so profound in like GitHub Actions, where I'm building my pipeline. In those cases, I'm most likely on an AMD 64 machine, and then I'm having to emulate the ARM side of things. And those builds can take a long time as well.
Yeah, I've got an open source project written in Rust called Comtria that we build for a whole bunch of different architectures. Because it can
Yep.
pretty much run on anything, and there's just people doing weird PowerPC stuff with it. But regardless, um, the just doing cross compilation is a very very slow process, particularly in GitHub Actions. So you know,
Yep. It really is.
we need better tooling
Um,
in this space.
yeah.
So
And so
how do we do this with Build Cloud then?
great question. So with Build Cloud, what's nice about this is here, let me just do BuildX LS, and I'll just show here all the builders that I have on my machine here. And what we'll see is that I've got a builder, okay, and this is that DevRel builder that we had before, and it has already configured. Here's an ARM64, and then the AMD 64. And so what's happening is basically there's kind of two sub endpoints, and so now if I let's say, all right, let's use that builder and let's do that same build. Um, oops. Let's do push. Yeah, it's because I need to tag that with my actual username here. Oh, well, now a lot of it's cache. But again, it's going to be using the native node for AMD 64 and a native node for ARM 64, and so there's no emulation that has to occur. It's delegating the work to the right machine,
Yeah, I
so
don't
that it
think I appreciated
runs.
that when we created the builder earlier. I didn't. So it's actually every time you create a Docker build cloud builder, it's
Yep,
creating a two node setup for AMD 64 and ARM 64. Is that right?
correct. Yep.
Okay,
Yeah. Okay.
nice.
So yeah, we saw that the ARM 64 was cached, but the AMD 64, since I haven't done one of those builds locally, okay, that took you know about 12 seconds to do the whole build there. Um, and for both architectures, including image pools and everything else, and pushing to Docker Hub in 37 seconds. Um, so yeah, not too bad there.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. So you mentioned also, or we talked about GitHub Actions for just a second. So I can segue to that for and show for this particular project. I have a GitHub action, and all I had to do is, and this looks pretty consistent with what a lot of folks will have for a container image build using the Docker action. So I log into Docker Hub, and then a lot of folks will have this set up BuildX, especially if they're going to do multi-architecture build. The only thing I had to swap out here, and this was from a previous demo, but I specified the driver for BuildX is going to be cloud, and then here's the endpoint. Now, in this particular case, I would have Docker/DevRel if I wanted to use the same builder. Thank you, Copilot, for giving me a suggestion that is not valid. And so now, if I were to build with, commit this and push it, my GitHub action would use the same builder that we were just building with here on my local machine, which means my CI pipeline gets all the same caches or will populate caches, et cetera, and leverage that same builder. And then I can do again the native multi-architecture build, and it's going to use those native nodes. So now in my GitHub action, it's no longer going to be, um, emulating those. And actually, if I jump over to the browser here, I know this was a little while ago when I did the builds, but this first commit was not using Docker Build Cloud. And so the build took about 3 minutes because, again, it had to emulate everything on the ARM side of things. While once I used Build Cloud, it dropped the build to about 26 seconds. Um, and again, for just the little sample React app, that's a pretty significant savings. Um, Now, I know you've been talking about Rust projects and whatnot, and so yeah, the more complex the project is, the more you're going to see the benefits that come out with it. So, and it doesn't take much config; it's just 2 lines of additional config I had to provide. So,
All right. Well, I mean, I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that people are watching this and going, I don't want this. Like, I think this makes a lot of sense to personal developers, hobbyists, as well as teams and enterprises. So why don't you lay the bad news on us? How much does it cost?
yeah, there's always that question, huh? So I'll jump back to the product page, and so what we've got is there's a couple different tiers here, okay, and So there's the personal, and then you can actually see the different builder sizes. So again, these aren't different sizes that you can choose from. It's basically you're going to get the size for the different tier that you've got right now. Um, and so you'll see, okay, even for personal, it's 8 core, 16 gig of RAM, and then it changes once you get up the team. Um, Everybody gets the native AMD and ARM builders. Um, and the way that billing works is by minutes of usage. Now, the one caveat I'll mention is when you're doing multi-architecture builds, since you're building on 2 nodes, even if you're taking 1 minute, if it's multi-architecture, that's technically 2 minutes because you're using it on 2 machines at that point in time. So just be aware of that. And so you get a certain number of minutes. You can buy additional minutes, and then there are um, kind of throttles for the number of parallel builds based on the tier that you have, and then you can purchase additional minutes as well too. So, um, and all of the pricing, everything is on the. Let's see. Let's actually go up here. Go to my personal one here. So, as of right
Oh, so you
now,
can get
since we're
started for
trying,
free.
yeah. So as of right now, we're trying to encourage people to try it out, and so yeah, the starter again, 50 minutes will go really quickly, and so yeah, you can try it out for free, and then from there, the team, the build cloud team. Gosh, I can get words right. Starts at $6 per user per month, and then that gives you additional 200 minutes, and then you can buy reserve minutes that then let you kind of pull those minutes and whatnot. So yeah,
Okay. All right. I'm going to ask the hard question now.
go for it.
Well, this pricing is per user per month, right? Now, assume I'm on a starter plan, which of course I think everyone should just go and try because it's free, right?
Yep.
Does that just mean I get one builder, or can I have 10 builders as long as I don't go over 50 minutes? Like, how does
So yeah, we do limit right now the free starter ones. You get one builder.
right? Okay.
We thought about that loophole ourselves too. So, yep, you do just get one builder. And actually, one of the things I'll mention too is the $6 per user per month. Okay, so if I've got 5 users, yeah, okay, I'm paying $30 a month, but each user gets 200 build minutes. So I'm actually getting 1,000 minutes at that point. So you're getting 200 build minutes per user as well, which I know isn't quite crystal clear looking at this, but that's how that's working.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's one of these things people can put their toe in the water, see if they get use out of it, and then
Yep.
$6 per user. When you look at those charts over time, and I'm not in sales, but I just see the value here. But when you look at
Yep.
those charts, that seems like a no brainer for me. Six bucks per user per month for all of those cool things that you're getting. So yeah, I hope
Yep.
people
And
find
I
this.
had I had to find it, so I've got this for you just to have it since we talked about it earlier. So, yeah.
There really is an SKCD for everything, but I particularly love this one just because throughout my entire career, it's always been applicable no matter what I'm doing. Building container images, doing GitOps, compiling. It's
Yep.
always there back in my mind.
It's so true.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's give people in the audience a few minutes. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them into the chat. I see that we have another one from Russell, so I'll pull that up in a
Yeah.
second. I'm going to move us back over to Big Facey mode. And before we get to any questions as they trickle in, if they trickle in, maybe you can tell us some super top secret things that's happening in Docker. What are we going to see over the next 3, 6, or 9 months?
Yeah, good question. So I think as we started off this conversation with, looking for opportunities to continue and just invest and make things easier and continue to, I mean, add new products and new capabilities to the things that we have. We started off, talked a little bit about Scout, and so I expect to see more in that space. And um, secure software supply chain. I know we've thrown out a couple teasers around container image signing and verification. So be on the lookout for things in that space. In the local development, we've talked a little bit about Docker debug and the ability to kind of attach debuggers and bring your own tools to images that don't have tools already installed them. And I actually am a really big fan of that because that means my final production images can be really small, really lightweight without having to package all my debug tooling into it, and I can bring it in along. So expect more in that space, how we can continue to help debug and troubleshoot. And then finally, just again, thinking about this kind of, as I talked about earlier, remote experience. Build Cloud, build is just one area that we've been able to make better, but continue to look more in that space as well too, of how we can continue to help just the development experience be a little bit easier. And personally, one of the things I'm trying to look for as well, especially with developer relations and training and education, like how do we just make this whole space easier to understand? And because there's a lot, there's a large mental model you have to have in your head, even really just to get going. So how can we continue to make that easier for people?
Yeah, you're right. It's a very volatile space. It's constantly evolving, and
Yeah.
I feel like I have to really put in a lot of effort to keep up with all the advancements. And then I think about the people that are been in this business for less than 3 years, or students coming out of university. It's a lot. So
It
yeah,
is. And I didn't even talk about, okay, the Atomic Jar acquisition and test containers, which I'm
that
actually
was my next
super
question. Oh, yeah. It's like
beat you to it.
there's more than one acquisition, right? I mean, was it two
Yeah.
years ago there was Tilt? You've got the test container stuff now, and I'm looking at this along with Docker Build Cloud, and what I see is a really compelling future for integration tests and CI/CD and
Yeah.
local developer experience, like merging Compose with Tilt and test containers. I mean, I would love to have all those people in one room and just watch them for a couple of days. I think that would be super exciting. But I
Yeah.
imagine there's good stuff coming there, definitely.
Yeah, and I'm excited too. Even just actually earlier today, seeing some of the demos with what the test containers team is doing with some of these integration points and everything. They're like, it's things we thought about before, but now that we're under the same roof as the rest of the Docker team, like there's some pretty cool stuff. And I wish I could share more, but I'll just have to stay tuned. So, um,
Awesome. All right, let's get to Russell's question. First, he says Docker Scout is awesome. That's awesome.
sweet.
And then he says, I'm going to put words in his mouth. He wants to understand how these minutes are shared in a team dynamic. If someone is off on leave for a month and there's 500 minutes, can you just maybe dive into that a
Yeah.
little bit more?
So as of today, each of those users are basically contributing minutes to a shared pool for that builder. And so, yeah, if you've got 3 users and each of them are bringing 200 minutes or whatever, that's 600 minutes shared for the entire pool of users for that builder. So they're not carved out. Okay, user one has this much, user two has that much, et cetera. It's a shared pool.
Awesome. All right.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. Apologies to everyone who
Absolutely.
had to change stream midway through. I still have no idea what's happening there. But what
All
I'm going to
good.
do is download all the bytes from both videos, join them together, and then I'll re-upload this as a single artifact. So yeah,
Sounds
that
good.
won't be confusing for people later at all. But
Yeah, that's right.
it'll work. Any last words? Anything you want to share before we say goodbye?
No, I just want to say, thanks for having me, and thanks for the conversations and questions, and thanks for those that are tuning in and asking questions, and kind of keeping us on our toes. We're always excited to demo the things that we're talking about, and but also probably more important to hear the feedback of like what would you like to see, what would you what would actually help solve your pain point. So keep that coming along as well too. And I see Russell put in, thanks for the demo. It was great, even with the light themed IDE. I get it. I get it. I'm personally a dark themed IDE person, but I have found that when it comes to presentations, I think the light themes tend to give better contrast for screen sharing and projection and all that kind of stuff. So
Here, I've
I feel
started
you.
embracing follow my system. So during the day, I typically have a
Uh,
light themed IDE, and I think for the first time in years, I streamed at lunchtime like 2 weeks ago, and the first
uh,
comment was, "Can you use dark mode?" I'm like, actually, I'm trying this thing where I just let the computer decide what's best, and I'm
yeah.
enjoying it. I'm liking the change. So anyway,
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. So, well, thanks
all right.
again. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, thank you so much. And everyone watching, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your questions, and we'll see you all next time. Have a great day.
Alrighty. Thanks all.
Thank you for watching Warcode Live.